I always wonder, if I had been born a few years later, would my life have been different? Would my parents have treated me the same way they did my sister? Or would I still have been nothing more than a failed draft before they created their masterpiece? My name is Lauren Bennett, the eldest child in a typical middle-class family in a small town in Northern California. From a young age, I knew my parents were not like most others. They didn't just want to raise children, they wanted to create extraordinary ones. My father, Richard Bennett, a software engineer, had an unshakable belief in science and data. My mother, Catherine Bennett, an ambitious elementary school teacher, was convinced that the right educational methods could turn any child into a genius. They started with me. Children's books lined our shelves, flashcards, math games, and cognitive development exercises filled our small home. By the time I turned 2, my mother was already teaching me the alphabet and introducing me to numbers. If I didn't learn fast enough, I could see the disappointment on her face. By the time I was 3, family dinners were no longer about conversation. They had become mini tests on vocabulary and logical reasoning. But there was one problem. I wasn't a prodigy. I learned to talk, walk, and recognize colors just like any other child. I didn't read before kindergarten. I couldn't name all 50 states by the age of 4, and there was nothing particularly exceptional about me that convinced my parents they were raising a genius. My mother's sighs grew heavier, my father's shrugs more frequent. They still continued to teach me, but their enthusiasm slowly faded. I didn't understand what I had done wrong, I only knew I hadn't met their expectations. And then, when I turned 4, my sister was born. Haley Bennett, a name my mother had carefully chosen, one that symbolized intelligence and excellence. From the moment she arrived, Haley became the center of our family. My mother immersed herself in the latest research on early childhood development. While I had grown up with simple wooden toys and picture books, Haley had an entire collection of brain-stimulating educational tools, ordered from top child development experts. I still remember the evenings when my mother would sit beside Haley, holding up vibrant flashcards, her voice filled with excitement. "Sweetheart, this is a triangle, can you say, triangle?" Haley had barely begun to walk, yet every time she babbled a new word, or showed the slightest hint of advanced coordination, my parents would exchange proud, knowing looks. As if they had just uncovered the next great mind of our generation. "Lauren, do you see your sister?" my father said one night, as I sat quietly in the corner, watching. "She has a gift. We're going to do everything we can to help her reach her full potential." I knew the real meaning behind those words. But you don't. In my own home, I slowly became a shadow. Haley was the special child, while I was just the ordinary firstborn. Not exceptional, not worth investing in. I didn't realize it immediately, but as the years passed, the gap between me and my sister grew wider and wider. On weekends I often escaped to my grandparents' house. William and Margaret Bennett were the only ones in the family who saw me and Haley as equals. Their house was just a few blocks away, yet it gave me a warmth I never found in my own home. They always made time to read to both of us, sharing hugs and smiles equally, never favoring one over the other. One afternoon, when I was 8 and Haley was 4, I sat beside Grandma Margaret on the couch, leaning into her warm embrace as she read a fairy tale. Haley sat on the other side, nibbling on a cookie. "You are both wonderful in your own way," Grandma said gently, stroking my hair. "No one is better than the other." Those words should have come from my parents, but they never did. I had grown used to being invisible in my own home. When I started elementary school, I thought maybe, at least there, I would have a chance to shine in my own way. But it turned out that nothing really changed. I went to a regular public school near our house, an ordinary school with standard classrooms, a small playground, and dedicated teachers. I wasn't the best student in my class, but I was hard-working. I read more books than my classmates, completed my homework diligently, and occasionally earned an A in some subjects. One time, after scoring the highest in my class on a math test, I eagerly brought my paper home to show my mother. She barely glanced at it before giving me a half-hearted nod. "Good job, sweetheart. But Haley just finished learning her multiplication tables. She's only 6 and she already understands division too. How amazing is that? I clenched my test paper, the joy of my achievement fading instantly. No matter what I did, it was never impressive enough. But whatever Haley did was always worth celebrating. When it was time for Haley to start school, she didn't go to public school like I did. My parents spent months researching prestigious academies and specialized programs before finally enrolling her in Westwood Academy, an elite private school for gifted students. Investment, a word that felt so foreign when talking about children. But to me, it perfectly described how my parents saw the two of us. Haley was a valuable investment. And me? I was just a part of the family, in the most insignificant way. Every day my parents drove Haley to her prestigious school, one with sprawling soccer fields, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and a curriculum designed for exceptional talent. Meanwhile, I walked to public school like any other ordinary kid. When Haley excelled in her exams, my mother rewarded her with expensive gifts, limited edition dolls, the latest iPad, anything she wanted. When I scored high on a test, I received a nod of acknowledgement or, if I was lucky, a half-hearted, "Good job, sweetheart." These differences grew over time, until they became an unspoken reality in my life. But the moment I truly realized my place in the family was when I turned 13. I had my own bedroom since I was little. Not very big, but it was my personal space. I had spent months decorating it just the way I liked. Posters of my favorite bands, neatly arranged bookshelves, and sentimental trinkets carefully placed on my desk. It was the one place in the house where I felt like I had any control. But then, Haley decided she wanted my room. "Mom, Lauren's room is bigger than mine," my sister complained over dinner. "I have so many books and study materials, but my room is too small. I don't have enough space to study." I immediately looked at my parents, waiting for them to dismiss the ridiculous request. But instead, I saw them exchange glances, as if they were actually considering it. "She has a point," my father mused. "Lauren, do you really need such a big room?" "Of course I do," I shot back. "It's my room." But my mother simply smiled. A soft, knowing smile I had seen too many times before. The kind of smile that meant she had already made up her mind, no matter how much I protested. "You'll still have your own room, Lauren, just a smaller one, you understand, don't you? Haley needs the space for her studies. She has a bright future ahead of her." Her voice carried an unspoken message. "And you don't." The next day when I got home from school it was already done. They had moved all my belongings into the smaller room that used to be Haley's. My old room was now empty, its walls bare and cold. And Haley? She was already settling in, arranging her things in my room. My former room, no longer mine. "Thanks, sis," Haley said, her voice completely devoid of guilt. "I'll make good use of it." I stood frozen at the doorway, feeling as if I had been pushed out of my own family once again. That night, I lay on the small bed in my unfamiliar new room, staring at the dark ceiling. This was the end. I knew then no matter how hard I tried, I would always come second in this house. High school passed by faster than I expected. I wasn't the top student, but my grades were solid. Good enough to apply to several universities with strong business programs. I spent months researching schools, writing essays, and participating in extracurricular activities to strengthen my application. I knew Ivy League schools were out of reach, but I didn't care. I just wanted a chance to study, to leave this house, and start a new life. I had a list of schools that fit my goals, ones with promising programs. One Sunday evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, I gathered all my courage and spoke about my plans. "I've applied to a few universities," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The business program at the University of California, Santa Barbara looks great, and I think it would be a good fit for me." My father set his fork and knife down, looking at me with an unreadable expression. "We need to talk about this," he said. A sinking feeling formed in my stomach. "Lauren, we won't be able to support you financially," my mother added. "We need to focus on Haley's future. She has a real shot at an Ivy League school and we have to prepare for that. I froze. What are you saying? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but my heart had already dropped to the pit of my stomach. You know, my father said, as if he were offering me wisdom. College isn't the only path. You can start working right after high school, or, if you really want to continue studying, you can figure it out on your own. Get a job. Take out loans. I turned to Haley, who was casually cutting her steak, seemingly uninterested in the conversation. And what about Haley? I asked, though I already knew the answer. My mother smiled proudly. She has incredible potential, and Ivy League schools are highly competitive. Tuition will be expensive, but investing in Haley is the right decision. I gripped my fork tighter, feeling the last bit of hope drain from me. You really think I don't deserve to go to college? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. It's not that, Lauren, my father sighed. It's just, you haven't shown any outstanding achievements like Haley has. We have to be realistic. Realistic? Reality was that I had worked tirelessly for years, only to be met with this indifference. The air around the table grew heavy. I had lost my appetite. Without saying another word, I pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked away. I went straight to my grandparents' house. When Grandma Margaret opened the door and saw the frustration and pain on my face, she immediately pulled me inside. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I sank into the couch, trying to hold back tears but failing. "They won't pay for my college," I choked out. "They said they need to save everything for Haley. They said I'm not worth investing in." Grandma Margaret and Grandpa William exchanged a glance. It wasn't one of surprise. They had witnessed this favoritism for years. But this time, there was something different in their expressions. Grandpa William sat beside me and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Lauren, you deserve this opportunity," he said, his voice unwavering. "You've worked hard, and we won't let you be left behind like this." I looked at him, not understanding what he meant. "Do you know why we've always saved our money?" Grandma Margaret asked, her gaze gentle but firm. "Not just for a comfortable retirement, but to help the people we love when they need it most." I looked up, my heart pounding. "You don't have to worry about tuition," Grandpa William said. "We'll cover all of it." I could barely believe what I was hearing. "But that's too much money. I can't." "You can and you will," Grandma Margaret interrupted, her voice unwavering. "We're not doing this out of obligation, Lauren. We're doing it because you deserve it." Tears welled up in my eyes. Not from anger or helplessness this time, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing that I wasn't alone. For the first time in years, I felt like someone truly believed in me. I was going to college. I was leaving that house. And I was going to prove that I was not the failure my parents thought I was. Stepping into college was the biggest turning point of my life. For the first time, I left the home where I had always been overlooked, and entered a world where no one knew me as the child with no potential from the Bennett family. I could finally start over. I enrolled at the University of California, Santa Barbara, majoring in business. Thanks to my grandparents, I didn't have to worry about tuition, but I told myself I had to work twice as hard to make them proud. In my first semester, I got a part-time job in the finance department on campus, a small office position that gave me access to professors and investment research. I quickly discovered something about myself. I had a knack for analyzing market trends. Corporate finance, risk management, and investment strategies didn't overwhelm me the way they did for some students. I thrived on them. I spent hours outside of class reading extra materials, tracking stock market patterns, and testing out simulated investment strategies. By my second year, I landed a competitive internship at a local investment firm. It wasn't just a learning opportunity, I was given actual projects to work on. One day, an analysis I conducted helped the company avoid a major financial loss. The head of the department called me into his office and said, "Lauren, you have an eye for detail that not everyone does. If you keep this up, you're going to go far in the finance industry." I walked out of his office that day with a strange yet empowering realization. For the first time in my life, someone in authority recognized my worth. I didn't need my parents' approval anymore. I had proven my own value. While I was building my career, step by step, Haley's life was taking a very different turn. She had been accepted into the University of Pennsylvania, one of the prestigious schools my parents had always dreamed of. The day her acceptance letter arrived, my mother cried with joy and my father popped open a bottle of champagne. I wasn't invited home that day, but I didn't care. At first, everything seemed to be going well for Haley. Her social media was flooded with pictures of elite student organizations, extravagant parties, and gatherings with accomplished peers. My parents continued to boast about their golden child at every family event. But then, through phone calls with my grandparents, I started hearing a different story. "Haley doesn't call home as much anymore," Grandma Margaret said during one of our conversations. "Your mother told me she's been complaining about the academic pressure. It seems like she doesn't like the school as much as they expected." As time passed, the updates about Haley only got worse. She started missing classes, spending more time partying and hanging out with her wealthy friends. I wasn't surprised. Haley had grown up with our parents fixing every problem for her, but in a rigorous university environment, no one could take her exams or write her essays for her. One day, my grandfather called me, his voice filled with concern. "Lauren, your parents are in a panic. They just received a warning letter from Haley's school. Her grades are plummeting, and if she doesn't improve, she might be suspended." I didn't say anything. I had seen this coming. My parents had done everything to create a perfect path for Haley, but they had never taught her how to be independent, how to face failure. Now, there was no one left to clean up her mess. A few months later, the inevitable happened. Haley was expelled due to poor grades and repeated disciplinary violations. She moved back home, for the first time in her life, with no clear plan for the future. My parents were devastated. They had placed all their hopes in Haley, and now she did nothing but sit in her room all day. No school, no job, no direction. They encouraged her to enroll elsewhere, to find another program, but Haley refused. "You don't understand anything," she screamed at them during a family dinner, according to my grandfather. "I tried my best, but college isn't for me. I don't want to do this anymore." Instead of the talented daughter they had once proudly flaunted, my parents were now faced with a bitter, aimless failure. I heard all of this through phone calls with my grandparents, but I never went back. I had my own life, a growing career, and I no longer wanted to be part of the chaos my parents had created. They had abandoned me long ago. Now, it was my turn to abandon them. Time passed faster than I had expected. Within a few years, I went from an intern to a full-fledged financial analyst. After graduating, I was hired at Sterling Capital, an investment firm based in San Francisco. Starting as a junior analyst, I gradually proved myself through high-stakes projects, leveraging my ability to assess risks and predict market trends. 3 years later, I was promoted to investment specialist, overseeing major client portfolios. I'll never forget the feeling of stepping into my new office, looking out over the San Francisco skyline from the 25th floor of Sterling Tower. I had earned this position on my own. No favors, no validation from my parents. My life was filled with strategic meetings, financial reports, and decisions that impacted millions of dollars. I had little time to think about the past. The people who once saw me as the failed draft no longer mattered. But fate, it seemed, had a way of bringing me back to my past, in the most unexpected ways. That Saturday afternoon, I was standing in line at the grocery store, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Lauren, is that you?" I turned around and came face to face with my mother, Catherine Bennett. She looked much older than the last time I had seen her, but in her eyes, I saw something I couldn't quite place. Was it happiness? Or a desperate attempt at reconciliation? "My God, I can't believe it's you." She placed a hand over her chest, staring at me as if she wasn't sure I was real. Beside her stood my father, Richard Bennett. He remained silent, studying me for a long moment before giving a slight nod. "It's been years since we last saw you." I didn't know how to respond. The distance between us wasn't accidental. It was a choice I had made, one I had never regretted. But now, standing in front of me, my parents no longer carried the same prideful air they once did. There was something softer about them. "Are you doing well?" my mother asked, her voice growing quieter, as if afraid my answer might hurt her. I hesitated for a moment before replying simply, "Yes, I'm doing well." "That's wonderful." She smiled, but it was an awkward smile. "Your father and I would love to have you over for dinner one night, just a family dinner. It would mean a lot if you could join us." I was ready to refuse immediately, but then I paused. Partly out of curiosity, partly because I wanted to see how my family had changed after all these years. "All right." A few days later, I stood in front of the house I once called home, but now it felt completely foreign. As I stepped inside, everything still looked the same. The old sofa, the long dining table, the framed photos on the walls. But there was one major difference. I no longer felt like I belonged here. Dinner began with small talk from my parents. They asked about my job, trying to sound interested, even though I knew they didn't understand a thing about finance. But the atmosphere shifted as soon as a high-pitched voice rang out from the front door. "Sorry everyone, I'm late." Haley walked in, her arm linked with a well-dressed man. "This is Ethan, my boyfriend," she announced proudly, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Ethan shook hands with my parents, flashing a polite smile. He looked a few years older than Haley, dressed in expensive attire, his hair perfectly styled, clearly someone from a wealthy background. Throughout dinner, Haley couldn't stop talking about Ethan. Ethan works in real estate. His family owns multiple commercial properties in New York. He's currently investing in a highly promising new project. My mother lit up with enthusiasm at the mention of that. "That's amazing. Haley, you've finally found someone who can help you settle down in life." I remained silent, observing. So this was the path Haley had chosen. An easy way out, rather than making it on her own. Midway through dinner, Haley turned to me, flashing a smug smile I recognized instantly. "Still single, Lauren?" she asked, her voice laced with condescension. "Spending too much time on work isn't good for you, you know. In the end, happiness is more important than money, right?" I set my fork down and looked at her calmly. "Haley, I don't earn money to buy happiness," I said, my tone steady. "I earn money, so I'll never have to depend on anyone else." The room felt uncomfortably silent. My parents avoided my gaze. Ethan glanced at Haley, looking slightly confused. "And Haley?" Her expression froze for a brief second before she forced out an awkward laugh. I had once been a shadow in this family. But now, I was the only one standing on my own 2 feet. After years of hard work, I had achieved something I once thought was impossible. I was promoted to Director of Investments at Sterling Capital. It was one of the biggest milestones of my career, proof of everything I had worked for. News of my promotion quickly reached my grandparents. When I called to tell them, Grandma Margaret's voice overflowed with pride. "You've done wonderfully, Lauren. We always knew you were meant for great things." "We need to celebrate," Grandpa William added enthusiastically. "A special occasion like this can't go unrecognized." I thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, this was worth celebrating. I decided to host a promotion party, a chance to share this victory with the people who truly mattered in my life. Since I didn't have much free time, I transferred money to my mother and asked her to handle the arrangements. After all, she had always been good at organizing family events. I told her to keep it simple but elegant, just a small gathering at home with family and close relatives. My mother seemed thrilled that I entrusted her with this. "Leave it to me, sweetheart, I'll make this party extra special." But I had no idea that her definition of special was completely different from mine. I walked into my parents' house with a smile on my face, but it disappeared within seconds. The house was over-the-top decorated, fresh flowers, silk ribbons, elaborate banners with the words, "Congratulations" written in big bold letters. I scanned the room, looking for the missing part of the message. Then I froze. Right in the center of the living room, hanging on the biggest wall, was a golden banner that read, "Congratulations on the engagement of Hailey and Ethan." I felt like I had just been punched in the stomach. I spun around to face my mother. She stood beside my father, both of them chatting happily with a few guests. When she saw me, her face lit up with excitement. "Lauren, you're here. Isn't everything wonderful?" I could barely breathe. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, my voice dropping low as I struggled to keep my composure. This was supposed to be my promotion party. My mother chuckled lightly, as if I were misunderstanding something trivial. "Auroran, don't you think this is also a special occasion worth celebrating? Hailey and Ethan got engaged. While I was preparing your party, I thought, why not combine the two? A family gathering, double the joy." Double? No. They had taken my party, used my money, and turned it into a celebration for Hailey. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms, almost drawing blood. I looked around the room. The guests were all raising their glasses, toasting to Hailey and Ethan. My grandparents stood in the corner, looking just as shocked as I was. Hailey walked over, one hand looped around Ethan's arm, the other raised to show off her sparkling engagement ring. "Do you like it, Lauren?" "Ethan picked it out just for me." I turned to Ethan. There was something off about his expression. Not the excitement of a man about to be married, but hesitation. I met his gaze. "You do realize this party wasn't meant to celebrate your engagement, don't you?" Ethan blinked. "What do you mean?" I stepped forward, raising my voice just enough for everyone to hear. "I want everyone here to know that this party was supposed to be a celebration of my promotion to Director of Investments at Sterling Capital. I was the one who transferred the money for this event. I trusted my mother to plan it, but instead, she turned my celebration into Hailey's personal engagement party, without even telling me." The room fell silent, so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Ethan slowly turned to Hailey, his face growing cold. "You told me this was just a small family gathering where your parents would announce our engagement." His voice was sharp. "You never mentioned that you stole your sister's party." Hailey's eyes widened in disbelief. "Ethan, don't listen to her, she's just jealous." Ethan took a step back, disappointment flashing across his face. "I think we need to talk." "Alone." Hailey looked around desperately, searching for help from my parents, but for the first time ever, they had nothing to say. Then, I felt a firm hand on my shoulder. I turned. It was my grandfather, William. "Lauren?" he said, his deep voice steady. "Your grandmother and I have thought long and hard about this. We've changed our will. Our entire estate will go to you." My mother gasped, horrified. "Dad, you can't do this, Hailey." "Yes, we can," Grandma Margaret cut in firmly. "Lauren is the only one in this family with perseverance, integrity, and real dedication. We trust her." The room remained dead silent. I took a deep breath, then turned toward the door. "I think I'll be leaving now," I said, not bothering to look back. "And don't ever contact me again." I walked out of that house, feeling lighter than ever. From that night on, I never spoke to my parents or Hailey again. I blocked their numbers, erased their address from my contacts. No more fake phone calls, no more empty justifications. I still kept in touch with my grandparents, the only people who had ever truly loved me without conditions. We continued our weekly dinners, sharing stories about life. With them, I never had to prove anything. They had believed in me from the very beginning. As for my parents, I heard about them through acquaintances. After Hailey's humiliating breakup with Ethan, she continued living at home, bouncing from one failed job to another, never putting in real effort for anything. My parents, having spent their entire lives solving every problem for her, now had no idea what to do except keep enabling her. And me? I kept moving forward. After over a year as Director of Investments, I had helped Sterling Capital achieve record-breaking success. Under my leadership, the company expanded its investment portfolio, reaching unprecedented levels of growth. My strategies didn't just elevate the firm, they made me a respected name in the financial world. Then one day, I was called into a special meeting. As I stepped into the sprawling boardroom on the top floor of Sterling Tower, I noticed every senior executive was present. No one spoke immediately, but I could sense the weight of the moment. Then Jonathan Brooks, the current CEO, stood up and addressed me. "Lauren, we've had extensive discussions about this. The company is at a crucial turning point, and we need a leader with vision. The board has voted, and we would like to offer you the position of CEO of Sterling Capital." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm the youngest on the board," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jonathan smiled. "Yes. And also the best." I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had once dreamed of. But when it arrived, I didn't feel the need to celebrate wildly. I had walked this path alone, and that made this victory even more meaningful. I became the youngest CEO in the company's history. News spread fast. Financial publications hailed me as a rising force in the investment world. I received endless invitations to conferences, interviews, and exclusive galas. Events I had never imagined attending before. But to me, only one celebration truly mattered. That night I went to my grandparents' house. They had prepared a small dinner, with my favorite stew and a bottle of wine that my grandfather had been saving for a special occasion. "You did it, Lauren," my grandfather said, raising his glass. "And you did it on your own terms." I smiled and clinked my glass with theirs. Outside the window, the lights of San Francisco stretched endlessly, a glowing sea of opportunity. I thought about everything I had endured. The years of being overlooked, the times I was cast aside. The pain of realizing I was never the favored child. But now, I had won. Not because I needed to prove anything to them, but because I had learned the most important lesson of all. My worth was never dependent on anyone's approval. I didn't need a pretend family to rely on. I had built my own life. Lauren Bennett's story is a testament to perseverance, independence, and the power of refusing to let the past define the future. In life, not everyone is born into fairness, but that doesn't mean we can't create our own value. True success isn't about proving something to others. It's about finding your own path and living life on your own terms. Sometimes, letting go of toxic relationships is the first step to achieving true freedom and happiness. What do you think about Lauren Bennett's story? Do you relate to her journey? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss more powerful stories about family, life, and the journey to self-worth.